Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You've been listening to Racine Raider football on your radio friend, AM 1400 WRJN. I am Evan Witalison here for the fifth quarter, your post-game show for the Racine Raiders. The Raiders post-game show is brought to you by Lynn's Sitco and Prosser's Premium RV Outlet out in Sturtevant. Now, we are here in the studio talking about the Raiders' 91-20 win over the Racine Threat. And yes, you did hear that score right. 91-20 Racine Raider victory. We are taking your phone calls tonight, so give us a call at 634-WRJN. That's 634-9756. Give us a call, and I want to hear your take on the game. Want to hear your thoughts, your reactions to the game, and also want to talk about the rivalries. This game is all week leading up to it, the being pumped up as the inner-city rivalry, talking about how these two teams are big-time rivals. And I guess the question I have for you, is this really a rivalry? The Raiders coming in were 5-0 against the Threat. Bell City Bowl 6 obviously made it 6-0 for the Raiders. And out of the 6 matchups that the Racine Threat have played against the Raiders, only one has the score been remotely close, and that was 2010. Now, this is the fourth Raider Threat game I've been a part of. I was an intern for the Raiders a couple seasons back. The Raiders defeated the Threat pretty easily that year. They beat the Threat twice last year, once in the playoffs, once during the regular season. Both blowouts, and then tonight, 91-20. So I want to get your thoughts. For Raider fans, if you're listening, give us a call, 634-WRJN. That is 634-9756. And let me get your thoughts. Is the Racine Threat a rival for the Raiders? And that got me thinking, too. You can also give us a call and talk about some of your favorite rivalries out there in other sports and in other leagues. So the NFL, NHL, MLB, NBA, NCAA. What are some of the your favorite rivalries in sports? But the final score was 91-20. Now, there was a time the Racine Threat did actually hold a lead, and they came out and took an early 6-0 lead. And I'll play that highlight for you guys really quick. The Raiders, the Threat scored on a Alba Burton, the quarterback, on a 15-yard touchdown run with 6:42 left in the first quarter.
Receivers left, 3 to the right for Albritton. Albritton 6 for 7 for 43 yards on this drive. Raiders coming with the blitz. Albritton rolling out to his right. He's going to keep it. Cuts upfield. Cuts inside. Albritton near the goal line and into the end zone. And the Threat strike first here in Bell City Bowl 6 with 6:42 to play in the first quarter.
And as you heard Don Wadewitz on the call, it was 6-0 Threat. And it stayed that way till late in the first quarter when the Racine Raiders tied it up to make it a 6-6 game on a 1-yard touchdown run by J.R. Taylor, who returned to the lineup today after missing last week's game due to being ill.
McClelland under center, I formation backfield. They try with Taylor. Nice spin move into the end zone. Touchdown Raiders. J.R. Taylor in from 2 yards out. His 5th TD of the season. And Racine, the Raiders, tie the score at 6 with 1:07 to play in the opening quarter.
And like that, it was tied 6-6. Now I'm going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we do have a call on the line, and we'll get this call as soon as we come back from break. We'll be back in 2 minutes. You're listening to the fifth quarter on your radio friend, AM 1400 WRJN.
Now, back to Racine Raiders football on WRJN.
And welcome back to the fifth quarter here on your radio friend, AM 1400 WRJN. We do have Phil on the line. Phil, how are you doing today?
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good. I just have a question about the Raiders and their league affiliation. it just seems like this league isn't all that solid. They win every game fairly easily ever since they joined it. Then you go outside the league and they play a team. I think it was from Des Moines that beat them rather handily. And I wonder if the Raiders would be. Just wanted a question for you. If the Raiders, you think, would be better served playing an independent schedule, because I think with their name they could still get some games against quality opponents, and I think attendance would go up when you would see better quality teams coming into Orlick Field.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I don't know a whole lot with regarding the league that they're in. Obviously, the Raiders are high above everybody else. As you said, they're pretty much blowing everybody out. But that does pose a very interesting question. I do have calling in a little bit, Don Wadewitz, the voice of the Raiders, calling in, and that's definitely be a question that I'm going to ask him. But are you still there, Phil? No, I think Phil had hung up, but thanks for calling, Phil. And like I said, that's a great question to ask, and I hope you continue to listen, because when Don Wadewitz just does get on the line, I'm going to pose that question to him, as he's been around the Racine Raiders for quite some time as the radio voice of the Raiders. But would the Raiders be better off switching to an independent schedule rather than being in a league? So that's a good question. And like Phil, you said, they would probably attract a pretty competitive schedule just by their name recognition, and I'm sure they would as well. But in regards to the league they're in right now, obviously you look at it, the Raiders seem to be that much above everybody else. But after the Raiders did tie it up at 6, they pretty much ran away with it the rest of the way. The second quarter, the Raiders outscored the Racine Threat 36-8, and then in the third quarter, 35-0, and in the fourth quarter, 14-6. Now the Threat came in with a bit of a rough few weeks. Now their head coach Brett Moss, he stepped down earlier in the week, and their safety Jason Pardo was named the interim coach for the Racine Threat. Now, he didn't play today due to a hip or a back injury, but he didn't play today. But he was the interim coach, serving as a player coach when he is able to return back to the field. But it's just been a really rough week for the Threat, and the Raiders definitely exposed them with that rough week, as they just ran away with the game. And you look at the stats overall, the Raiders dominated. 30 first downs to 16 for the Threat. They had 510 total yards of offense to 247 for the Threat. The Raiders ran for 262 yards and threw for 248. The Threat threw for 161 ran for 161 and threw for 86. Now, I think the only stat you can look at that the Threat won was time of possession, but as Coach Gino said, he'll take the final score over time of possession any day of the week. And then, penalties, the Threat had 8 penalties for 56 yards, and a number of them on the kickoff. So obviously the Threat came in quite sloppy today, and that was probably the biggest one of the other biggest reasons they lost. They were very sloppy, and I'm sure the new coach probably was a big factor in that. And we'll see if the Threat can improve from here on out as they fall to 0-3 on the year in conference, and the Raiders improved to 3-0. But I definitely, Phil, thanks for calling, and welcome to call in at any show coming up for the fifth quarter. Do love talking to the listeners. The number, again, is 634-WRJN. That's 634-9756. And, you look at the individual stats. Craig McClendon had 9 completions and 10 attempts for 179 yards and 3 touchdowns. And the backup, Anthony Johnson, 3 for 3 for 49 and a touchdown. And Josh Teiskle, 3 for 4 and 35 yards and a touchdown. But I think the Raiders came in wanting to basically prove a point. That point was the Raiders and Threat aren't a rivalry. I think that's the point they wanted to prove. I would be interested to hear what Coach Kennedy would have had to say after the game if they were able to get him post-game. And, Coach Kennedy was quoted in the Racine paper earlier in the week talking about how he does not feel this is a rivalry game. He doesn't think it is, and you look at the overall record between these two teams, the Raiders dominating 6-0. It's definitely not a rivalry game. But the Raiders did take the lead 13-6 after being down on a 19-yard touchdown pass to Doris and Palmer to go with 12:20 left in the second. Here's the call.
Spiegel and D'Elia to the left. D'Elia's going to line up just off the line on the left. Worthington just off the line on the right. Palmer out wide right. Lashley, the lone back in the backfield. McClellan looking to pass. Going for Palmer. Corner of the end zone. Leaping catch. Touchdown and the flag. Touchdown Raiders. Dorian Palmer, his first TD catch of the season. And Racine, the Raiders lead 12-6.
And the Raiders never looked back after that and pretty much ran away. We do have another caller on the line, and thank you for calling. And what's your name and where are you calling from tonight?
Well, this is Jim from Kenosha, and I'm pretty much a regular Raiders fan, but in the past there's been such games that they've had such an attendance that if you don't get there really, really early, you end up parking up by Horlick somewhere. I just wondered what tonight's attendance was because I didn't bother coming up because I figured it'd be so many people.
Tonight's attendance was 1,756, so smaller than the games in the years past, but still pretty decent-sized crowd. But you said you've been following the Raiders for a while, and
yeah. So back when I've gone to games when they were the green and gold with the G on their helmet.
Ah, very cool. Now, a question I have for you, you say you've been following this for a while, the Racine Threat, do you see this as a rivalry game between the two teams or not?
Well, I think it started out to be one, but this last couple of times it's been not really a great rivalry. It does bring in people, though, all the time, and whether these teams like each other or not, or management likes each other or not, they do make money on these games, especially when they hold them at Horlick. And I have a suggestion, too, about that, if you don't mind. Can I tell you something?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Maybe the Raiders and the Threat team people should sit down and have all the games at Horlick Field because they far outdraw when they go to what they do at Hams. And you have the beer sales and that. And I think if the Raiders would pay a little more gate or a little more part to the other team, they would probably both end up with more money by having it at Horlick strictly.
Yeah, that is definitely an interesting suggestion, and it probably is one that they should maybe look into because you said they fall outdraw the at Horlick Field than they do Hammersfield. But I guess the question would be what the city of Racine would think for that because it is run by the city of Racine. But before I let you go, I just have one final question for you since today was talked about as a rivalry game. In sports, what is your favorite rivalry game?
In any sport?
Yeah.
Oh, Packer Bears, probably. Army Navy is another good one.
Definitely. Yeah, Packers, Bears.
I bleed green and gold when the Packers are on, and I'm former Navy, so I go for the blue and gold when it's against Army. So that's a pretty good rivalry. You can't pick much better than that.
No, those are two really good ones, definitely. And thank you for calling, and I hope you have a good rest of your night, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Yep, goodbye. So yeah, two rivalries he mentioned, and I have a list written down in front of me. I do have Packers, Bears, and I have Army, Navy written on there. Some others that I do have is your Red Sox, Yankees. They're actually playing right now this weekend out in Fenway. Then you have the Badgers versus Minnesota, Golden Gophers. Ohio State versus Michigan. That's always a big one as well. And our Army, Navy, Cowboys, Giants, Cardinals, Cubs, and would like to hear from some other rivalries that you enjoy listening to. Thank you for the callers that we've had. We are going to take our next break. When we come back, we're going to continue to take your calls here on the fifth quarter with on your radio friend, AM 1400 WRJN. We'll be back in a couple minutes. And welcome back to the fifth quarter here on your radio friend, AM 1400 WRJN. I'm your host, Evan Witalison, and we're taking your phone calls here, 634 WRJN, talking Racine Raiders football. And the Raiders were able, after they took that the 14-6 lead, they were able to take a 13-6. They would take a 20-6 lead as well. Don Wadewitz on the call.
At 19.